Welcome and thank you for tuning in to today's build of the famous F-14 in Top Gun livery. Today, we embark on an exciting journey, immersing ourselves in the meticulous art of recreating this iconic aircraft in scale model form. Prepare to be dazzled by the intricate details and craftsmanship as we bring this legendary fighter jet to life, one piece at a time. We begin with the cockpit. While the Tamiya kit part is already quite detailed, I have opted for an aftermarket set from Eduard, which is even more precise. Since it is made of resin, the support plastic needs to be trimmed off first. A rotary tool helps to smooth everything out, ensuring perfection in every tiny detail. When working with resin, always wear a mask to protect yourself, as the dust is harmful to your lungs. It's a shame to remove the detailed instrument panels, but this is necessary if you want to use a 3D decal. Here, sandpaper and a rotary tool are essential to prepare the surface properly. Now it's time to apply the primer and the main color of the cockpit. This step is crucial as it sets the stage for all the fine details to come. Let's give our model the perfect foundation it deserves. Once everything has dried, individual parts, such as the cables, are meticulously painted by hand. This careful attention to detail will truly bring the cockpit to life. Unfortunately, much of this intricate work won't be visible once the seats are installed. But hey, at least you get to see it in all its glory. After applying a glossy varnish and allowing it to dry for 24 hours, it's time to apply a wash. This step will add depth and bring out the fine details of the cockpit. After about 40 minutes, the wash can be removed with a sponge or cotton swab. If the wash has dried too hard, you can dip your tools in a bit of odorless thinner, which makes the removal process easier. Now, it's time to apply the 3D decals. For this job, I'm using Ammo MIG Ultra Glue, an acrylic glue that allows some time to position the decal perfectly. These 3D decals are incredibly detailed, adding a stunning level of realism to the cockpit. Excess glue can be easily removed with a cotton swab and typically leaves no trace behind. Unfortunately, the decals have a slightly different color in some areas. However, these can be carefully touched up with a brush to ensure a seamless finish. Now we recreate the anti-glare hood covers using Tamiya epoxy putty quick type. These covers are unique to the F-14, adding a distinct touch to our model. This putty is a modeler's dream, allowing us to shape and mold with precision. Watch as we sculpt these tiny masterpieces, adding yet another layer of authenticity to our build. A deerfoot stippler dipped in water is used to create a beautiful texture, enhancing the realism of these unique F-14 anti-glare hood covers. After the putty has dried for 24 hours, the primer can be applied. Once primed, the cover is carefully hand-painted. To finish, an oil paint wash is applied to the raised areas, completing the leather look of the hood covers. This final touch adds depth and realism, making the cockpit truly come to life. Eduard also offers a set of ejection seats specifically for this Tamiya kit, which we will be using for this build. For the seats, we will again use Tamiya epoxy putty to replicate the typical fabric texture. To ensure the putty adheres better to the smooth resin surface, lines are carefully scored into the plastic with a sharp knife. A sharp toothpick is used to press the putty into the corners of the seat, ensuring every detail is perfectly replicated. After the seat is sprayed black with an airbrush, the dry brush technique is used to highlight the details, bringing out the intricate textures and features of the seat. Time to apply the decals to the seat. The set comes with every conceivable decal. My method for applying these starts with a glossy varnish, followed by a layer of microset on the spot where the decal will go. The decal is then soaked in lukewarm water for about 30 seconds until it detaches from the backing paper and then placed onto the seat. Another application of microset is added on top of the decal, and it's gently tapped down with a soft brush to remove any air bubbles. After the decal solution has dried for 5 minutes, microsol is applied. At this stage, the decal should not be touched, as it is now merging with the surface. For larger decals or those with a thick backing paper, like those from Tamiya, the edges can be treated with wet sandpaper to round them off for a painted-on look. However, this step is not really necessary for the decals from Eduard. Now, it's about to get really fun. My last build, the F-16, was depicted in flight, allowing me to skip painting the landing gear bays. For this F-14 build, however, I've decided to go all out on detailing the landing gear bays. Get ready for some serious scratch building. First, several holes are drilled to hold all the cables. I'm relying heavily on reference photos to ensure accuracy. For the cable holders, 6mm lead wire is flattened so that it can be threaded through the holes later on. This ensures a secure and accurate placement of the cables, adding to the overall realism of the landing gear bays. Now the lead wire can be threaded through the holders to simulate cables. This is quite a fiddly job, but I believe it's worth the effort for the added realism. Cut plastic pieces can also be used to hold the cables in place. Finally, a photo-etched part is used to conceal the now slightly battered plastic. Talking about photo-etched parts, my method for working with them involves first removing the connectors with a diamond file and smoothing everything out. Then I use Ammo MIG Ultra Glue to attach the parts. This glue is perfect for photo-etched parts because it takes a while to dry, allowing precise placement. However, for smaller parts, it's not suitable as they wouldn't hold. For those, I still rely on super glue. Reference photos of the F-14 show that the landing gear bays are quite beaten up, with paint chipping off in several areas. We can simulate this effect using a chipping sponge, adding a touch of gritty realism that makes our model look like it's seen some serious action. The individual parts of the landing gear bays can now be glued together. Due to all the modifications and cables, this requires a great deal of patience. In the end, though, I managed to assemble everything without any issues. Finally, we can glue together the cockpit, the nose landing gear bay, and the front fuselage. This crucial step brings all our meticulous work together, setting the stage for the rest of the build. Even though Tamiya is known for producing kits that practically build themselves, there are still some gaps that need filling. In this case, I use sprue glue to fill them, ensuring a seamless and polished finish. After the sprue glue has dried for 24 hours, it is smoothed down with 400 and 1500 grit sandpaper. The instructions actually suggest attaching the walls of the main landing gear to the top of the fuselage. However, this would prevent us from making any modifications, and it would be a shame if the main landing gear didn't receive the same meticulous treatment as the nose one. Speaking of the fuselage, did I mention that I punched out every hole and re-scribed all the seam lines? Well, I guess I'm officially a rivet counter now. Anyway, back to the main landing gear. Since the underside logically doesn't provide support for the plastic walls, a bit of blue tack is used to hold the walls in the correct position. After dry fitting everything, I secure them with Tamiya extra thin cement. And now the fun begins as we start laying all the cables and other details for the main landing gear. This time, I'm also using small copper tubes to create fancy holders, adding even more realism to our model. With that done, the landing gear bays are airbrushed white and given the usual weathering treatment. This process adds depth, making the bays look authentically worn and used. The mechanism for the movable wings of the F-14 can now be installed. For the paint job of the iconic F-14, I'm using a new technique developed by Canadian professional modeler Chris Sieber, also known as Luftraum 72. This technique promises to depict the typical F-14 paint job much better than the usual pre-shading method. I'll leave a link to his blog in the description, where the technique is explained in detail. Or you can just keep watching, as I've made a few adjustments to the technique myself. First, the dried primer. It's important to use a lacquer primer like Mr. Surfacer 1500, is brushed with Tamiya X20A thinner. The thinner must be applied very sparingly, as otherwise it can ruin the primer. Next, a white acrylic ink is applied with a flat brush. Directly after, a Deerfoot stippler brush, which has also been dipped in Tamiya X20A thinner, is used to blend the ink. It's important to hold the brush very loosely and not to apply too much pressure, as this can remove too much ink from the surface. When done correctly, this creates a wonderfully realistic texture that can be seen on many F-14s. For larger surfaces, I recommend working on smaller sections, step by step. This way, you have enough time to properly blend everything. After the ink has dried, a thinned mixture, approximately 40% paint and 60% thinner, is sprayed over the texture. It's important not to completely cover the effect, so the white still slightly shows through. It's best to test this on a spare part first, as the correct mixture can depend on the paint used. It's crucial to use a lacquer paint here, as acrylic paints wouldn't withstand the following steps. Next comes a crucial step, as the following process is very aggressive towards the freshly applied paint. Now, a lacquer satin varnish should be applied. This varnish protects the underlying paint as much as possible. You can't use an acrylic varnish here, as it would immediately dissolve in the later stages. I let the satin varnish dry for 24 hours, and to be safe, applied a second coat of satin varnish, which I also let dry for another 24 hours. The dried varnish is carefully treated with 6000 grit sandpaper. This is not to polish it, but to create small imperfections on a micro level. Also, don't overdo this step. You don't want to scratch the varnish too much. Using a flat brush, another layer of Tamiya X20A is applied. Again, you must be very careful not to apply too much, as the thinner can attack the underlying paint layers. The 2 layers of varnish should help protect the layers beneath. And now, a mix of black and white acrylic ink in a 2:1 ratio is brushed on with a flat brush. The whole mixture is then blended again using a deerfoot stippler that has been dipped in Tamiya X20A. After about 20 to 30 minutes of drying time, the dark color is removed using a good modeler-suitable cotton swab and 50% to 80% isopropyl alcohol. Here, you must be very careful not to apply too much pressure. Otherwise, you might end up removing all the paint, including the primer, and exposing the bare plastic. It's best to start with 50% isopropyl alcohol and then work your way up to 80%. X20A thinner can also be used for removal, but it is even more aggressive than alcohol. A deerfoot stippler, lightly dipped in X20A, can also be used to further blend the areas where the ink has already been removed. One advantage of this technique, aside from creating a truly realistic texture, is that you don't need to apply a separate enamel wash and panel line wash later. The aircraft already looks perfectly weathered, with the ink naturally settling between the panels, giving it that battle-hardened look straight out of the hangar. Did I mention the 20 to 30 minutes drying time only applies after pre-drying the ink with a hairdryer? Otherwise, the drying time increases significantly. The ink really takes a long time to dry fully. It is highly recommended to work on small areas at a time. Otherwise, it can quickly turn into a disaster. The final step is to apply a heavily thinned mixture of the main color. Here, I use 80% thinner and 20% paint, but as I mentioned, this depends on the paint you're using. The goal is for the surface to subtly take on the hue of the main color, blending everything together beautifully. This step brings the entire model to life, making it look like it just rolled off the carrier deck, ready for its next mission. Now we can paint all the small details, adding those final touches that bring the model to life. Those who know my videos understand how much I love weathering. However, with the acrylic ink technique we've used, the model is already quite weathered. Still, we can enhance the effect here and there using the dot filter technique with white oil paint. Small dots of oil paint are applied to the desired positions and then blended with a round brush dipped in odorless thinner. This adds subtle variations and depth, making the weathering look even more realistic. It's important to protect the model beforehand with a glossy varnish. I use A-Stand Aqua Gloss Varnish for this job. This protects the paint job from the quite aggressive odorless thinner. Some streaks can be added, especially on the wings, using oil paint. This step adds that extra touch, making it look like the aircraft has seen countless sorties and endured the harsh elements, bringing our model to a whole new level of authenticity. Due to the wing movement, the F-14 develops a characteristic streaking effect that we want to replicate. First, we apply dirt buildup at the innermost part of the wing. The edges can be softened with a brush dipped in odorless thinner. Our trusty helper, the Deerfoot stippler, is also very useful for finishing the edges. Masking tape is used to mark the areas where the streaks will be applied. Reference photos are extremely useful here to estimate how far the effect extends in reality. Next, the lines are lightly drawn with a dry saw brush and then enhanced with another saw brush dipped in thinner. This process is repeated until the desired effect is achieved. The result is an incredibly realistic replication of the iconic streaks, making it look like our F-14 has seen countless missions and weathered the skies like a true veteran of the fleet. After removing the masking tape, we might notice that there's too much oil paint at the edges. This can be faded using a round brush and the Deerfoot stippler with a bit of odorless thinner to help blend it out. Last but not least, we turn our attention to the engine exhaust. Here, we use various lacquer-based metallic paints to replicate the effect of the real subject. This step is crucial, as the shimmering metallic hues add a final touch of realism, making our model look like it's just returned from a high-speed, high-altitude mission, with the engine exhausts showing the true wear and tear of intense flight. The video has now been running for 1 hour and 15 minutes, making it the longest video I've ever published on YouTube. I could show you so much more, such as the landing gear or the armament, but that would only unnecessarily lengthen the video. If you've watched this far, I want to thank you immensely for your interest. YouTube rewards videos that are watched for longer periods, allowing me to present my work to even more people. I would be even more thrilled if you click the subscribe button and leave a comment letting me know what you think of my work. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for your support and for joining me on this model building journey. So, let's put everything together and take a look at the final result. Witness the culmination of our hard work, attention to detail, and dedication. I hope you enjoy seeing this F-14 in all its glory as much as I enjoyed building it. And here it is, the F-14 from Top Gun in all its glory, a true testament to the beauty of this iconic aircraft. I hope you enjoyed this episode, but honestly, that's not all. I'm also building a small flight deck with crew, and of course Goose will be taking his place next to Maverick. If you want to see more, hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, keep your eyes on the skies and happy modeling. One last thing, did you know I'm on Patreon? Currently, I don't have any supporters, and I would be thrilled if you decided to support me there. On Patreon, you can download high-resolution images of my builds, get some cool merchandise, and follow along with a regular diary of my builds. Right now, without supporters, it feels like a bit of a one-sided conversation, so your support would mean the world to me. The link to my Patreon can be found in the description. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you on Patreon. Many heartfelt thanks.